All right, in this video, I'm going to be showing you something that I call the newspaper method. And the newspaper method of hand building is where you start with a slab of clay and you actually use a ball of newspaper on the inside and you create the clay form around that ball of newspaper, which helps support it from the inside and keeps it from collapsing. So in order to get started with the newspaper method, you want to start with a slab of clay that's fairly thick. I've run this one through the slab roller. We'll be learning how to use that in class, but this is a relatively thick slab. The reason you want it a little bit thicker is because we don't want to risk the paper kind of poking through the surface of the clay. So this is how you do the newspaper method. You start with a ball of newspaper, and it really doesn't need to be very large. If it's too big, your clay isn't going to be able to wrap around it. And what you're going to do is you are going to take your piece of clay and basically form kind of like a clay burrito. And you want to make sure that your clay does overlap to some extent. Normally when we're attaching two ends together, we would slip and score, but because this clay is very, very soft and we're attaching one piece to itself, we know that it's the same level, it has the same moisture level. So it's pretty safe in this instance to start pressing and forming those two ends together. You can see here that we have an opening at both ends. I kind of do something kind of like a little Tootsie Roll effect where I take the clay and I kind of shove it together. And what I'm doing is I'm forcing all of that clay to come to a seal on one end. Set that aside. We'll come back to that in just a minute. I'm going to do the same thing on the other end. Now, I don't have anything in particular that I'm making with this newspaper form, but you could use this for a number of different shapes and forms in your clay sculpture box. I've had people use this to create the body of like an animal. If you were doing an animal lying down and you want to get that whole kind of torso formed, you could absolutely do the newspaper method. It does look a little gnarly to begin with. You can see this is pretty rough, but once you have those ends sealed off, you can start working with your hands, and you want to do this while the clay is still very, very soft, which mine is. And I'm going to start folding those in. And I'm just going to start working around. Now, this always makes people chuckle, but you can use a little wooden paddle here to help you kind of round out any protrusions. Again, I can see this. I want to form out any cracks, smooth out any gaps here. Eventually what will happen is we will cut this open to reveal the space on the inside, and then we'll just simply pull the newspaper out. You could do this if you were doing a form like a pumpkin. You might want a bigger piece to work with, but anything where it has a big, round, almost spherical shape, you could easily use this method. It never makes a perfect sphere, but you can see here I've got kind of a nice little body. So if I wanted to make, I don't know, like a hippopotamus body, it's a little bit rotund. It works really, really well. This is a little too soft to cut into if I were making a serious piece, but I'll make a quick little cut just for the sake of demonstration to show you how you would break into that. I could roll that on my canvas here. So I would do a little bit more forming and smoothing, but you get the idea. Now I have air trapped inside here. So I'm gonna give that a flat bottom so it doesn't roll away on me. I'm gonna get my clay knife. Now, if this were seriously my sculpture, I would probably draw where I want to cut first. Again, just for the sake of demonstration, you can see I'm cutting at an angle here. I'm not cutting straight up and down. I'm holding my blade at an angle. That's going to allow the lid to sit on top of the sculpture without falling down into the bottom. So you can see here, I've already got a lid. I could come back at a later time and smooth that out. But what I'm left with here is that opening. And once I'm confident that it's safe to pull the newspaper out, I could do that. So I'm just gonna pinch, gently remove. I'm being a little aggressive. So you're always gonna have a little bit of adjustment, but now I've actually got a hollow form. If you choose to use the newspaper method, you have to always double check that your lid fits on the piece. Now this one doesn't have a handle yet. I would definitely want a handle. But if you look on the inside, we have evidence that that paper was in there. There's lots of texture. So you would definitely want to take a few minutes while the clay is still wet to smooth out those bumps and cracks. But this is a nice method if you're doing something where you need a closed form that needs to remain round. These finishing details can be adjusted along the way, but it's a very quick and easy way to create a round form.